I'm Clint Gatewood, Vice President of Channel Development here at SaaSmax. I want to welcome you to the Value Building System webinar today from our Crossing the SaaSm series of webinars that we do. They're educational, and we'll talk more about the webinar and the content coming up. We have a great guest today who will be doing the presentation and the presenting. So whether it's morning where you're at or afternoon or evening, we have resellers and partners that are joining throughout the globe. So thank you for coming. We are going to hold on for about another minute before we get started. People are jumping in as we speak, so we're going to give everyone a chance, about 1 minute, and I will be back, and we'll get started. Oops. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Clint Gatewood, Vice President of Channel Development here at SaaSmax. Thank you for participating today in our Crossing the SaaSm webinar. And today we have some great content about growing the value within your company. So as business owners, we're always looking for ways of increasing the value of our company and continuing to grow that. And today we're going to be joined by John Warrillow. So John is the creator of the Value Build System. He's exited many companies, has been an entrepreneur himself, and has exited 4 different companies. And he's written a couple books on the subject and some different subjects. And he's done something that I haven't done or even thought about. And if you saw me, you'd know why. But I've never ran a marathon, nor do I look to doing it, as well as bike racing. So he's a very active athlete as well. And I'd like to welcome John. And John, while you're introducing yourself a little bit, I will make you presenter, and we'll continue with the presentation today. So John, take it away.
Thanks, Clinton, and thank you for joining. It's great to be with you guys. And Clinton's right. We're going to talk a little bit about building the value of your company. We've got 8 unique drivers of company value that we'll talk about today, and I'll share with you a little story about a company that did a great job of improving their value and give you some suggestions and tips for how you might want to improve the value of your company. My understanding from Clinton before the call and talking to Dina is that you are typically people that are working in the channel. So you could be an MSP or any number of different technology providers in that space. And so when we talk about what you do, I'm mindful that that's the role that you play in the marketplace. So with that, let me show my screen. It doesn't.
And I would just mention, John, while you're doing that, I will mention that we will be doing questions and answers later. So if you have questions, please type them in the bottom right-hand corner of the GoToMeeting screen and type in your questions. Don't forget to type them in. I'm sure all of you are going to have questions, so ask your questions away while we're going. And John, did you see the
I did not get the presentation link, so I don't know if you've shared the screen with me. I haven't got that yet. I think we might be hung up. So okay, I think maybe no, still not getting it on this end. Clinton, I'm going to dial back into the call. Be with you back in about 3 seconds. Hang on, 3 minutes.
Sorry, everyone. John will be right back. He had to jump off real quick, so just bear with us a moment while we get rid of these technical details, and we'll be on our way. I do apologize. We had tested everything out before, but looks like we're having a little bit of a problem here today. But be right with it.
I'm back, Clinton. If you want to go ahead and share screen, let's see what comes up here.
Yep, you should be getting a.
I got it. There we go. There we go. All good on your end? You can see...
yes, we can see it. We're good to go. Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining. Sorry about the little hiccup. I wrote a book, I guess about 5 years ago now, called Built to Sell, which was written after I'd started and exited a couple of companies and learned, I think, a few things about how do you transform an owner-operated company into a sellable business. A lot of people write books because they got a business behind it and they want to promote it. At the time, I didn't really have a business to promote. I was just kind of keen to get some of these ideas on paper. As part of the marketing for the book, we built a little questionnaire. Think of it like a men's health test where you'd answer a bunch of questions and it would give you, a score out of 100 on how valuable and sellable your company was. And this was just something we put on our website, and it was funny. It became the most popular thing we did, and it was one of those aha moments which made me realize there was actually a business opportunity in helping business owners get their business ready to sell. And so that's what we do today. We're in the business of shifting the balance of power in favor of the small business owner as you approach your exit. As you may know, when you go to sell your company, you're going to face some stiff headwinds. There are on the other side of the negotiation table corporate buyers, mercenary private equity groups who literally want to take advantage of your naivete. They know you're busy running your company, serving clients, dealing with problems, and you don't have the opportunity to get educated about what drives the value of their business. And they prey on that ignorance. They prey on that ignorance. They take advantage of business owners all day long. And so we're deeply passionate about fixing that, giving you the ammunition, the knowledge, the expertise to fight back and get a fair price for your value, your business. Whether you want to sell your business in 5 years, 10 years, or 25 years, what we're going to talk about today are the things that actually will drive the value of your business whenever you want to sell it. Rest assured, if you have no interest in selling anytime soon, know that if you're working on the drivers we're going to talk about today, you are building the value of your company. And just like when you open your 401k statement at the end of the month and you see those numbers going up, you should feel a sense of confidence that as you grow your business, it's growing in value as well. So one of the biggest misconceptions a lot of us have around the value of our companies is that the value of the business is going to be largely determined by two factors. Number one is the revenue of the company, and what I've got here in front of you are some data points from our analysis of more than 30,000 people. We've used the Value Builder system, and we have everybody who starts with us go through the Value Builder questionnaire. And in that time, during the questionnaire, we'll prompt you for whether you've received an offer to buy your business, and if so, at what multiple of your pre-tax profit. And what we find is that the average multiple across, again, more than 30,000 business owners now is 3.66 times pre-tax profit. So if you've got an MSP and you're doing whatever, $1 million in profit, it's probably worth, if you have an average Value Builder score of about $3.5 million, $3.6 million. Yet when we started to isolate the different cohorts of responses, particularly those with less than $1 million in annual sales, you can see a very different story emerge. Businesses with less than $1 million in sales, for example, are getting much lower multiples. $1 million to $3 million, about average, 3 to 10, better, 10 plus, even better. So you're right to assume that the value of your firm is going to go up as you grow. So you're partially right, I think, in that assumption. You're also, I think, right to assume that the industry you're in, whether you're an MSP or you're a consulting firm or an agency, that's going to have an impact on the value of your business. You can see up on screen here, what I've got is the valuation multiples by industry segment, 2-digit NAICS code. So you can see overall, again, 3.66 times pre-tax profit, yet when we look at different industries, you can see that a very different story starts to emerge. Some businesses are much better multiples. Professional, scientific, and technical services, which is probably where most of the people on this call will sit, is one of the higher multiples. One of the lowest multiples you can see is administrative and support and waste management. The story sacks who are in admin support are getting very low multiples, just 1.8 times their pre-tax profit, which makes Jill's story all the more incredible. So Jill is the founder of a company called Ruby Receptionist. She built her business up to $11 million in total annual revenue. by answering people's phones. So if you're a doctor, dentist, a plumber, and you want someone to pick up a live voice, to pick up the phone when a customer calls you, you would hire a Ruby receptionist. So she built this company up to $11 million in revenue. Now, with $11 million of revenue, it's a receptionist business, probably relatively low margin. Let's imagine she's able to net bottom line before tax $1 million, 10% profit margin. So based on the last stat I just showed you, that administrative support companies traded about 1.8 times profit, you'd expect Jill's company to be worth around 1.8 times $1 million, or $1.8 million, something like that. Jill just sold her company for almost $40 million. So there is something, in fact, a number of things that are more important than the industry that you're in or the revenue that you have. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the drivers that are not inherent within the revenue that you have and the profitability that you have and the industry that you're in. We're going to talk about a number of drivers which don't show up on a profit and loss statement, but have equally, in fact, in many cases, impact on the value of your business. Starting with something that I think everybody on this phone call will be appreciative of and glad to hear, and that is that businesses with recurring revenue have much better multiples. So almost double that of the standard multiple. So if you're an MSP and you're doing managed services, you're sending your customers a monthly bill, and they have to cancel that in order to get you to stop billing them, that business is going to be worth a lot more than a company that's doing project work. If you're doing project work, while it may feel good to grow your revenue, it's actually undermining your profitability, your value, because businesses who are going to come and acquire your company are looking for recurring revenue. They are deeply discount your project revenue. So if there's anything I want you to take away from this slide, it's that recurring revenue drives up the value of your business. Now, for those in the managed services space, you know how to do recurring billing. I mean, you know how to structure those relationships. There may be other people on the call where you're in a project-based business, or you're in an industry altogether different than the traditional sort of managed service provider space, in which case you might be scratching your head saying, well, how do I create recurring revenue? Well, what we found in doing some research is that there are 9 unique subscription models. If anybody cares, you can go to, I wrote a book about it called The Automatic Customer, and you can go to automaticcustomer.com and download a free copy of the 9 subscription models. I'll just give you one right now just to get your mind spinning on the possibilities. The subscription model I thought we'd talk about is one characterized by H. Bloom. So on the left, Sonyu Panda, on the right is Brian Burkhardt. These guys are the founders of H. Bloom. And H. Bloom is a flower store. And you might think, what on earth does a flower store have to do with managed service providers? Well, at H. Bloom, they wanted to really recreate the business of selling flowers, because a traditional flower store is a terrible business. If you know anything about this industry, it's horrific. 60% of their inventory gets thrown out every month. Why? Well, because they buy too many flowers, and literally the flowers are rotting in the bottom of the fridge, and they have to throw them out. How do you get customers in a flower store? Well, you have to get expensive real estate in a bank tower or a high street of a retail strip in a major center in order to intercept customers. And so it's incredibly difficult to basically fund that, selling relatively low margin flowers. And what's worse, Mother's Day and Valentine's drives a third of your sales. So you've got incredible cyclicality into your business. Well, these guys, Panda again on the left, Brian Burkhardt on the right, said, we're going to totally blow up the typical flower model, and we're going to sell flowers on subscription. So we're going to approach the restaurants, the hotels, and the spas that have flowers on their reception table. And it's generally the general manager that goes out and replaces those flowers. We're going to do it for them, take a task off their project list, and basically auto ship flowers every 2 weeks. We'll get rid of the old ones, we'll replenish them with new ones. Typical lifetime value of an H. Bloom subscriber is more than $4,000. Compare that with the average transaction in a flower store, which is just $29 in America today. So H. Bloom has created an incredibly predictable business. They throw out, by the way, in contrast to the typical flower store that throws out 60% of their revenue, at H. Bloom, their inventory, at H. Bloom, they throw out less than 2%. Why? Because they know how many subscribers they have, right? Because they're built on a subscription model. So I'm assuming every one of you is on a subscription model already. I hope you are. If you're not, it's time to get with the program, because a subscription model is going to increase the value of your company. It's going to make it way more predictable and frankly way more fun to run. There's nothing worse than throwing out half of your inventory every month. In this case, they're throwing out less than 2. So number one lesson is recurring revenue is going to drive the value of your business. Number 2 is the monopoly control. Warren Buffett talks about the idea of a competitive moat around the businesses that he invests in, right? He's looking for companies with a differentiated value proposition. Why does he want that? Well, Buffett believes that with a differentiated value proposition, you to some extent control your pricing, right? Because you're not competing in a Coke Pepsi battle with someone else. You control your pricing. You get better pricing. When you have control over your pricing, you get better margins. Better margins allows you to invest more in sales and marketing. More sales and marketing makes you more different than your competitors. It basically thickens and widens your competitive moat. And that's why he invests in companies with a deep and wide moat. And so the companies with what we call the monopoly control, in other words, a product or service for which they really are unique in the marketplace, are getting, as you can see on screen, much better multiples. Again, this comes down to how unique and differentiated your core product or service is from its competitors. The worst thing you can do is be responding to requests for proposals. If you are responding for RFPs, your company is basically worthless, because the very same rules that make you respond to an RFP will basically take that company or that customer of yours and force them to reissue the RFP every year or two. And as a result, acquirers look at companies that compete on price as basically worthless, because when an acquirer buys a business, they're making a buy versus build decision. And if they look at your business and say, well, we could easily replicate what they've created by just pricing it 10% below market temporarily, they're not going to buy your business. They are simply going to compete and lower the price. Yet if you've got something truly unique, something that nobody else has, that you do something in a really different way, that's where acquirers get interested. Take a look at Stephanie Breedlove. So Stephanie is a mom. She's the mom of 2 boys, 23 and 25 now. But when they first were born, she wanted to hire a nanny. She was a consultant with Anderson, the former Accenture, or the pre-runner to Accenture, and she didn't want to take her, step off the career ladder. And so she brought in a nanny. And because she was an accountant, she wanted to pay the nanny legitimately. And so she called up ADP, and ADP punted her call 5 times. They rerouted her 5 different times because nobody wanted to set up her account. She's a little like lady in Texas. She wants to pay her nanny. Why bother? It's one person. ADP gets paid on thousands of seats. When General Motors calls to pay their payroll through ADP listens, right? Because they get a small percentage of everybody's payroll. Some lady in Texas who wants to pay her nanny, forget about it. Stephanie has such a bad experience that she turns to her husband and says, there's a business opportunity here. Why don't we create a payroll company for paying nannies? I bet you there are other parents out there that want to pay nannies legitimately, but are getting this terrible experience from the big incumbent payroll providers. Well, Stephanie did exactly that. She starts Breedlove and Associates. She becomes the world's greatest payroll for nannies company. So literally, that's how niched down she was. She's doing payroll for nannies. She builds her business up over a 25-year period. So, if you're following along at home, that's not, rocket ship growth. That's kind of steady, solid growth over 25 years. She sells that business for $54 million. That is a ridiculous multiple. It is absolutely off the charts on any comparison point. The question then becomes, how on earth did Stephanie sell her $9 million business for 6 times revenue? The answer is that she had a monopoly control, because she went to the one company in her category that had the most to gain in buying Breedlove Associates. The company was called Care.com. Care.com had 7 million members who signed up for a community, or basically a ratings board for care providers. So think of Care.com as the Angie's List of care providers. You plug in your zip code and it will give you a list of peer-rated nannies or elder care workers in your local community. That's really valuable if you've got a young child who you want taken care of and you don't want to just hand them off to someone you haven't vetted. Well, care.com helps you vet through the peer review process. Care.com has 7 million parents as subscribers. Doing the math again, when you look at Stephanie Breedlove's company, she had $9 million of revenue on the backs of just 10,000 customers. Care.com's got 7 million people who need to pay payroll. If just 1% of that 7 million subscriber base chose Breedlove and Associates for payroll, that's 70,000 customers. That's 7 times the size that Breedlove is today. Now imagine she could sell 2% or 5% or 10% of the Care.com base. That's how she made the case to getting $54 million for a $9 million company. And it would not have been possible had she not stuck to her knitting, done one thing better than anybody else. Because back in the first year of her business, she reached a fork in the road where she had $300,000 in revenue, and she reached a critical point. And we've all reached this as entrepreneurs. I'm sure you've reached it in your own business as well. The critical point is, how do I grow? What do I do to grow? Do I, on one hand, cross-sell my existing customers? And if you listen to any business pundit on the planet, if you look at any book on the shelf today, they will tell you that cross-selling your existing customers is about 10 times easier than it is to go find a new customer. Yet if Stephanie, in her case, had chosen other things to cross-sell her existing customers to, she would have looked at her base and said, okay, busy parents, nanny to pay, what else do they need? They probably need lawn care services and snow removal services. If she had done that, she would have taken a huge step backwards in terms of the value of her business. She would never have sold her company for anything close to 6 times revenue. Because for all those other services, she would have been completely at parity with other providers. She would have been responding to RFPs. She wouldn't have had a unique value proposition in the marketplace. Instead, what Stephanie did was go out and find more parents with nannies to pay. Much tougher, right? Much tougher than just simply going about and cross-selling a bunch of ancillary services to your existing customers. But that's how she got 6 times revenue for her business, because she did one thing better than anybody else. So again, the lesson here is sell less stuff to more people. Most small businesses grow up by selling lots of stuff to a few people. They become a mile wide in products and services and an inch deep. They get too much customer concentration. Only the owner knows how to deliver most of the services, and they get, again, marred in what we call the complexity ceiling, where they can't grow beyond. So the key is to sell less stuff to more people. Number 3, do you track your Net Promoter Score? You probably do. You probably heard of Net Promoter Score, the Fred Reichheld methodology, but it's going to be really important if you're looking to eventually sell your business over the next 5, 10, or 20 years to start now by tracking your Net Promoter Score, because increasingly acquirers are asking, what's your Net Promoter Score? Why do they do that? Well, Net Promoter Score is the only customer satisfaction research tool that is predictive that your company will go on to grow. And what do acquirers want to know? Well, they want to know how your business is going to perform when you leave. And so what Reichheld's methodology does, the founder of Net Promoter Score, it allows you to predict the future growth rate of your company. Just look at the research. Reichheld, founder of Net Promoter, looked at a 20-year period, and he looked at companies that had average scores on the Net Promoter Score question. And they grew about at the rate of the economy. Then he looked at the folks who had a world-class Net Promoter Score of 50% or greater. Those businesses are people like Harley Davidson, Google, Marriott, USAA, Apple, etc. Those businesses grow at more than double the rate. Why? Well, what Net Promoter Score does is it predicts customers taking one of 2 behaviors. Number 1, that they will repurchase from you. We've already talked about recurring revenue. Number 2, they will refer. So how do you calculate your Net Promoter Score? You're going to survey your customers. If you're not already doing this, and many of you already will be doing this, but if you're not already doing this, you're going to survey your customers. You're going to ask them a simple question. Scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this to a friend or colleague? Let me say it again. On a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this to a friend or colleague? You're going to then bucket your responses into one of 3 categories. You're going to have people who give you a 9 or a 10. They're your promoters. Let's imagine in this hypothetical example, it's 25%. You're going to have a bucket or a group of people who give you a 7 or an 8. Not super happy, but also not pissed off either. They're going to give you a 7 or an 8, and you're going to call those passives. Again, in this hypothetical example, let's say it's 70%. And then you're going to have detractors. These are guys who give you a 0 through 6. They're actively saying bad things about you in the marketplace. They're not likely to repurchase from you. Let's imagine this hypothetical example that equates to 5% of your customer base. Well, to figure out your net promoter score, you're simply taking your percentage of promoters and subtracting your percentage of detractors. This hypothetical example, you get to 20, which would be above average, by the way. Reichheld in his research found that the average company has between 10 and 15% net promoter score. So to be at 20, you're above average. But 50 is the gold standard. It's Stephanie Breedlove's case. In her case, she got to 78% NPS score. It's an example of the obsession that she had on driving up this number because she knew it would be predictive of her future growth rate. Blackbird Ventures, one of the leading venture capital firms out there, and you can see the quote from them on their screen. So again, whether you want to get acquired by a large technology services provider, or you want to get acquired by a private equity group or a venture capital group, they all look at net promoter score. Every company that we've ever looked at, from Microsoft to Dell to Apple to virtually every software as a service company, from Rackspace to Intuit, uses net promoter score. So it's incredibly important to measure this so that you're on the same page with them. You've got the same basic lexicon for measuring customer satisfaction. Number 4, Switzerland structure. You've seen the country of Switzerland. It's this crazy little country. I've got it on the map here. It's this tiny little country in red. It's landlocked, first of all, and it's smack dab in the middle of Europe. Yet, if you know anything about the geopolitical history of Switzerland, they didn't join either of the world wars. They didn't send troops to Iraq. They didn't even join the United Nations before the entire country had a referendum on whether or not to join the United Nations. I mean, these guys are obsessed with independence. And I want you to remember that obsession when it comes to your own business, because the most valuable businesses are also obsessed with independence. They are obsessed with independence from any of the key stakeholders, meaning you can't be too dependent on any one customer, employee, or supplier. Let me show you the research. One of the questions we ask on the Value Builder questionnaire is how well you know your customers. We talk only to the business owners when we do the questionnaire, and we say, how well do you know your customers? And again, average multiple, yet for those who know each of their customers by first name, which is so counterintuitive when you think about everything you've learned about customer service, as you got to know your customers, their spouse's name, their dog's name, their kid's birthday. Well, actually, the inverse is true. The most valuable businesses are the ones where the owner doesn't really know their customers personally and rarely gets involved in dealing with an individual customer. So again, to score well on Switzerland structure, you've got to make sure that your business is independent of any one employee, and that includes you. Can't be too dependent on you or any one of your employees. It also can't be too dependent on a single customer. Any more than 15% of your revenue coming from a single customer is going to be a red flag for a buyer. And number 3, you've also got to make sure that no one supplier drives more than 15% of your supply. And that's where Rick Day comes in. So Rick Day is the founder of Daycom Systems, telephony reseller, installs gear from Avaya to Mitel, and back in the day, Cisco and Nortel. He built his business to $26 million in revenue. And on the outside, you'd look at Rick's business, employing more than 100 employees, as a pillar of the community, as a gold standard. You'd look at him and say, this is a guy I want to be like. But there was a problem brewing in Rick's business, and that is that he was getting too dependent on a single supplier, Avaya. Early in his career, he would spec out various different hardware packages, again, from Nortel, Mitel, and Avaya. But over time, Avaya started giving him better deal terms, longer to pay, deeper discounts, better rebates. As a result, Rick started to consolidate spending with Daycom Systems. When he went to sell his business, he got crickets. Nobody was interested. When he asked why not, what he found out was they were worried about his dependence on Avaya. They were worried that what if Avaya went bankrupt? What if Avaya changed strategy and eliminated their channel? What if they decided to go direct? You're out of business. He finally sold his business for just 4 times EBITDA. And I've already showed you what a discount that is for a $26 million business. Yet, if you unpack the actual deal terms, you find out that just 40% was paid up front, 40% in a 3-year note, and 20% was actually in an earnout, which you and I both know is at risk. So even super charitably, his business sold for around 3 times EBITDA, which is a deep, deep discount of what he should have gotten had he not been overly dependent on one supplier. So for you, what you've got to do is make sure that you reduce your reliance on any one of the 3 stakeholders. No one customer should represent more than 15% of your revenue. No one employee should hold you ransom or hostage, and no one supplier should be able to do the same. Last one. When an acquirer goes and buys your business, for you, it's the end game, right? So you're thinking 5, 10 years out, you're going to sell your business. For them, it's the starting line, right? They want to know what's the growth potential of your business. So you got it to $1 million in sales or 5 million in sales and 10 million in sales. Is it possible, they're going to ask, to get this business to 100 million in sales? That's going to be what's going through their mind. So they want to know what's the growth potential of your business. One of the questions we ask on the Value Builder questionnaire is designed to drive at that, how scalable your company is. And we ask the simple question, if you had 5 times more demand in your company overnight, if you had literally 5 times more customers kind of waiting to buy, how easy would it be for you to accommodate 5x more demand? Again, life of the tool 3.76. Those who said it would be impossible, think of the advertising agency that works on a project basis or the law firm, get a deep discount. Yet when we looked at those who said that would be very easy, SaaS-based, for example, software company, those businesses are getting much better multiples. So for you, what's the secret? The secret is to make sure you leave some of the soil, if you will, to use a farming analogy, left to plow. You don't go out and make sure that all of the possible market share is gobbled up, because an acquirer is going to look at that business and say, well, there's nothing more I can do. And that's where my story of Rod comes in. So you may recognize this face. Guy's name is Rod Jury. He is the founder of a unicorn. Unicorn's name is Xero, a SaaS-based, cloud-based accounting software that's taking Intuit, in a head-to-head battle against Intuit. Well, what you may not know about Rod is he got the money to start Xero by selling a company called Aftermail. Now, Aftermail was in an interesting time. This just goes back a decade or so, when you remember when Sarbanes-Oxley came in and everybody was worried about archiving email and making sure that old email paper trails were able to be found. Well, big companies had to basically keep their email on file for years, and all of them were scrambling to find a way to do that. Well, Rod developed an application called Aftermail, which allows you to archive all your old email. And it takes it off your servers and basically cleans it up and makes it a secure process. Well, Rod proved his business model by selling Aftermail to 2 Fortune 500 companies. And then he went to a systems integrator who was working with the other 498 Fortune 500 companies and said, look, I've proven the business case here. I've got $2 million in revenue off the backs of 2 Fortune 500 companies that are using Aftermail. You guys already do business with the other 498 Fortune 500 companies. Why don't you buy my company? He sold his $2 million business for $35 million, 15 of which was paid in cash upfront. Again, this multiple doesn't make sense. There is, if you look at multiples based on the revenue of your company or the industry you're in, Rod's multiple is completely nonsensical. It's not until you understand what drives the value of your business, and in particular what acquirers look for when they're buying a business, do you really start to understand why some of these valuations are what they are. So lesson number 5, in Rod's case, he left lots of field to plow. He proved the concept with 2 Fortune 500 companies, didn't get greedy, and said, look, you've got the other 498, why don't you go out and take advantage of that? I want to leave you, before we kind of break and end, I want to leave you with this sort of postscript. I mentioned this company, Jill Nelson, at the beginning of this presentation. I said she sold this $11 million business for $38.8 million, and I kind of posed the question, there must be something else. What on earth did she do to drive up her multiple to that sort of level? Well, what Jill did was something interesting. She found that in her business, she worked on a disparate or a distributed kind of model where she had freelance phone answering people, receptionists, if you will, all over the country, right? Working from home, answering phones. And when she had a surge of phone calls, she found that her systems got overwhelmed and that she couldn't accommodate all the extra phone calls. So people were calling in expecting to get a live voice to book their plumbing appointment or book their meeting with their lawyer, and they were getting voicemail. And so what Jill did to handle these big surges is she built a little piece of routing technology, which allowed her to route the calls seamlessly in real time to available receptionists. She basically created this homegrown piece of software. Well, a private equity company saw that software and immediately realized that what she had built for the receptionist business, they could apply to virtually every industry they did business with. And so that's why she was able to sell her company for such an enormous multiple. She developed something that was truly differentiated. In other words, she'd focused on her monopoly control, which was not the fact that she was handling people's phone calls. That was a commodity business left to the basically lowest cost provider. What she had done was develop something that was truly unique, truly differentiated, which was this routing software, which enabled her to get such a high multiple. So again, for you, as you think about your own business, and again, whether you want to sell in 5 years, 25 years, or just know that you're building the value of your company, it comes down to 5 big things. Recurring revenue, which should be music to the ears on everyone on this call. Less stuff to more people. Don't make a mistake so many of us as business owners make, which is being a mile wide and an inch deep. If you're not already tracking Net Promoter, do it now and make sure you can lift your Net Promoter to north of 50 to get that bump in revenue. Remember Switzerland, reduce your reliance on a single customer, employee, or supplier. And finally, leave some field left to plow. Now, if you're interested in potentially seeing how this might apply to your business, what I'd encourage you to do is go to valuebuilder.com. You can take the Value Builder questionnaire. It takes about 12 minutes, 13 minutes to complete, and we will give you your Value Builder score of 100. So you can see how you benchmark against other companies that we've talked about today, other companies in your industry. We'll also give you an opportunity to kind of do a review of your results from someone on our team. So if that's of interest, just jump over to valuebuilder.com and complete the questionnaire you see there. Clinton, what questions do you have on your end?
Okay, excellent. So one of the first questions, we will be having the slides will be coming out, so we will send you a copy of the presentation so you can have a look at that. Just so you know, and I'm trying to get this thing opened up here. So we will be sending the slides out. We're asking now on your multiple on pre-tax, when you were talking early on in the presentation, why do you use the metrics of pre-tax profit?
So we have business owners complete the Value Builder questionnaire without the help of their accountant. So we use pre-tax profit, which most business owners can tell off the top of their head. They generally are not necessarily quite as familiar with things like EBITDA or EBIT or cash flow, which is why we use pre-tax profit as on the questionnaire. Does that make sense?
It does. So, and then how do you judge? How do you go about doing the promoter scores and stuff like that? I mean, do you work with companies like you work with companies to help them understand how to do that, or how does one go about? You send out a survey and you just start telling it, and that's really what you do, or is there different systems that you've seen people use to do that?
Yeah, I mean, within Value Builder, we have a platform within Value Builder, so we'll do that for you if that's of interest. So that's part of the Value Builder system, as we've got a built-in system to do it. It's not hard to do. I mean, if you've only got 5 clients, for example, you can do it face-to-face verbally. And while that won't be statistically significant, it'll be interesting. It should trigger an interesting conversation, because the one thing that you're going to want to do, that Reicheld's book, The One Number You Need, it talks about Net Promoter, and it's a bit of a fallacy because there's actually 2 parts to the question. The first question is, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this to a friend or colleague? The second part of the question is simply why, and that's a question you leave open-ended. And so if you were, face to face with a customer and you wanted to ask this question, you'd ask them 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend us? And then you'd simply say, why is that? And whether they give you a 0 or a 10, they're going to then just give you verbatim some little golden nuggets about why you're either performing well or not performing well. And that's really where the kind of raw material for improving your business lies in analyzing those data points.
Okay, great. So it's just basically a two-part survey that you send out. Do you find whenever you ask people though, like up front, do you think that most of them are honest with people when you're talking to them about that?
So anonymity is going to give you a much better read. So if you have the luxury of doing an anonymous survey, and if you do it through ValueBuilder, it will be anonymous. That's going to give you a much cleaner read. So using email to capture this, having if you do live events, having a card that people can fill out on the table and leave with you is another great strategy. So you're going to want, if possible, to ensure that it's anonymous, because that's just going to give you just much better feedback. Yeah,
I think people would be more willing to share with you if you couldn't retaliate, I guess, on them, get upset with them. So exactly. We got about 4 minutes left, folks. So go ahead and keep bringing your questions in. If we can't get to your questions, we'll answer them afterwards. Another question is, how does one come up with valuation when you're trying to raise capital versus sell the business?
Interesting question. So, so when you're trying to raise capital, a couple of different options. Obviously, you've got angel investors, friends and family, venture capital, all of whom are pretty classic ways to go about it. If you want to plot them on a degree of sophistication, you've got friends and family on one side, and you've got VC, on the other side, and angels in the middle. When it comes to an early stage business, valuation is a little bit what the market will bear. So if you can create some sort of competitive tension to do this, some sort of multiple people bidding for a tranche of equity in your company, that's going to let the market determine what a fair valuation is. You can put together a pro forma business plan and sort of say in 5 years your business is going to be worth X. I mean, it's, as you and I both know, it's not really worth the paper it's even printed on, because it's just one assumption built on another assumption, and it really is just a house of cards. So it's very difficult to come up with a bulletproof or a defendable valuation. So in the early days, friends and family, it is a little bit arbitrary to be clear, and most people invest in those rounds not because they think they're going to get a huge return, but literally to support the owner. If they get their money back with a bit of a return, they're usually happy. Angels are a slightly more sophisticated crowd, but still they're going to use a lot of preferred debt and convertible debt, I should say, not preferred debt. So convertible debt, if you don't know, is a way that you can raise money for your business without actually valuing the equity. So basically what you're going to do is take a loan from an investor, and that investor can convert that loan into equity at the time of the more sophisticated round of investment, usually from a venture capital firm. So that eliminates the whole need to value your business. You can literally just basically take a loan, and usually you're not paying that interest rate back on a monthly basis. It is carrying to the point of a VC round. But be careful with convertible debt, because the assumption, if you're going to take on convertible debt, is that there will be some liquidity event down the road, and that you want to make sure that's something you're comfortable with, that you are really going down the road of bringing on a sophisticated round of investment. It's not a tool that you necessarily probably want to use if you're still kind of wondering how much you want to sell the company and at what pace, because if you do take on any sort of professional money, so to speak, the assumption is that you're gonna want to at some point exit.
Excellent. We're going to wrap up today. I appreciate everybody coming in. If we didn't get to your questions, we will get them sent out to you. I appreciate everyone that's come to the webinar this afternoon. If you are a SaaSm solution provider already or looking to become one, we will be in touch with you afterwards. We'll also be sending out a recording of the event. So look forward to that coming out. And John, thank you very, very much for joining us today. I greatly appreciate it.
No problem.
Great content. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day and a great afternoon, and enjoy your upcoming weekend.